Welcome to the Liberty Insider. This is the program that brings you discussion, analysis, news, and in-depth reporting on religious liberty in the United States and around the world. My name is Lincoln Steed, editor of Liberty Magazine, and my guest is attorney Allen Reinach, executive director of the Church State Council.
Glad to be with you, Lincoln.
I titled this program, Two Horns.
Yes, indeed.
Now, we're on the horns of a dilemma as a nation internationally. As we record this program, the President of the United States he'd already drawn a line in the sand on Syria, and someone stepped across it, and it looks like something's going to happen. As that looms, I know many people in the United States, many Christians are thinking prophecy. The whole Middle East is so highly charged. And many evangelical Christians see prophetic significance in the existence of Israel and our necessity to support Israel. What I think many of them miss, and you and I need to talk about this, is while they see American exceptionalism and God's favor on it, they don't so easily see the role of the United States itself in prophecy. The Bible has a lot to say about the United States, doesn't it? Once you accept the particular beast fitting this nation.
We as Seventh-day Adventists have uniquely, I think, identified the second beast of Revelation 13 as the United States. And there's a lot of good biblical reasons for that, which I don't think we have time to focus on in this program.
Now, there's many beasts in Daniel and Revelation.
But the final power, you know, this is the passage. It's this beast that brings the world the infamous mark of the beast and 666 and a final round of persecution. But there are things about the character of this nation that are identified in this prophecy. And even I think most Seventh-day Adventists who recognize America in prophecy here fail to really consider the significance of how it's described in the passage.
Before you go into that significance, but let's revisit the beast, because people that are not particularly, well, literate is one word you can use on Bible things, but nor interested.
Who haven't studied the prophecies.
Might not realize that, you know, the link we make is Daniel 2, where there was an image given in a dream to Nebuchadnezzar, divided by metals, in that case not beasts, and Daniel was then told what those kingdoms were. And the kingdoms were then symbolized by beasts in other prophecies. Then elsewhere he gives this succession of beasts, and the interpretation is essentially given.
Babylon, Greece, Persia, Greece, Rome, all symbolized by ferocious beasts of different kinds. So, lion, bear,
it's not a false interpretation to assign kingdoms to beasts.
Correct.
Then at the end of all of that sequence, we're presented as another beast. Remember, rises out of the land,
right?
Which, ironically, can be easily linked to an unpeopled area because the sea is out of people. Sea is a symbol for people.
Sea is a symbol of
so
peoples.
it talks about this beast, this two-horned beast, a lamb-like or initially peaceful beast that then becomes aggressive, and it's relatively easy in the sequence. Because, you know, one kingdom follows another, to see that this is the time frame for the rise of the United States. And then once you see that, its very nature is described very plainly in this prophecy. So it's hardly it's not that everyone would necessarily agree with us, but it's hardly a stretch to apply this beast to the United States.
Fair enough. But the thing I disagree with is the sequence that the Lamb describes our founding, Christ-like, peaceful, meek, mild, etc., protective of our rights. And the dragon describes something future. The text of the passage, and I have opened to it, then I saw Revelation 13:11, then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had two horns like a lamb, so that's in the past tense, and it spoke like a dragon.
Yes.
Now the theologians tell me that is a type of a perfect tense that describes action that was not completed in the past. It begun in the past, but it's continuing into the present. And so what we have as this description is this tension which I think if we stop and think about it, in American history, we have these wonderful ideals of civil and religious freedom. Very fitting description, 2 horns. Like a lamb in the Bible, the horn is a symbol of power. And so we talked about the separation of powers in our last show. The separation of powers, the protection for civil and religious freedom, because we protect against power becoming accumulated in the tyranny of power.
Some other observers have tried to see in these 2 horns the separation of church and state.
That's another part of the protection
These are all reasonable analogies to draw
religious freedom. Yeah. Absolutely. So it's these, and if you think about it, those who are familiar with prophecy, in the prophecies of Daniel chapter 7 and 8, the power that dominated the West during the Middle Ages was pictured as a single little horn that consolidated civil and religious authority and became a persecuting power. Think the Inquisition. Here we have a separation between civil and religious authority, protection for civil and religious freedom. We have these marvelous principles of freedom that have made the United States a beacon of freedom to the world.
An underlying aggression from the beginning.
At the same time, can you think of any ethnic group that has not been mistreated at some point or another, beginning with Native Americans, but there was a terrible anti-Catholicism going back to the early days. Of course, we had African slavery, so we've had a problem there. You know, I'm living in California. We imported Chinese laborers who died by the thousands building the railroads. We interned the Japanese during World War II.
This is, and you're right, what American exceptionalism blinds people to is that this country, or no country, is an exception to human nature. And human beings have the same tendencies. The United States exemplified attitudes of it at the time of its founding in the peoples that came in. What I believe is the unique thing, and it's really the lodestar of Americanism, or the American state, is the Constitution, which of course was informed by progressive thinkers, religious and secular at that time. And so this stands up there as a guiding star, and we haven't yet blanked it out totally. But if you look just at the history of the United States, it's as imperfect as any country. It's what we say is the United States, why should it be the policeman of the world? We're a peaceful country, there's isolationist. That's never been true. The United States has never, practically speaking, been isolationist. It's always been expansionist. You know, the 50 states sort of spread over half the world. You know, that's the nature of empires. It's become a latter-day empire. But it still has this unique, universal aspect of freedom and rights, and of course buried within that wonderful religious liberty sentiments. And we need to cling to that.
Well, and I think one of the key things to think about in seeing the tension in our history between the Lamb and the Dragon, between the wonderful values and principles that we espouse and our failure to live up to them, is this whole concept of American civil religion and what you mentioned, American exceptionalism. We have a blind spot as Americans. We tend to have this idea that God blesses America, that God is on our side.
Automatically, regardless of what we do.
And then we justify being the world's policeman, which sometimes becomes being the world's bully. You know, projecting our power, throwing our weight around internationally, and we're uncritical about whether that's really essential. Now, Congress is going to debate whether we should project American power into Syria, and I don't have the answer to that question, but I'm glad that there's at least going to be some discussion about it.
Which is the way it should operate. You know, so often we hear about it on the news, and Congress lament that they had no part in it. So the system at least is working, but even the system is on some predicates, as you say, from its very founding. There were some principles embedded in the United States that can easily be used to be an enforcing and dictatorial power, particularly on religious matters.
But I want to talk a little more about American exceptionalism, because I think that
there's books written on that.
Of course, look, it's a given that we're exceptional in our commitment to the wonderful values of civil and religious freedom. That's what makes us exceptional. We're not exceptional when we fail to live up to them, but there is an inherent danger, and that is a danger from our civil religion that we turn God into a tribal deity of the United States.
I like that.
And what I mean by a tribal deity, all true religion, whatever you call it,
Or a national icon.
all true religion is based on the premise that God is sovereign, and we as the creatures, as the created beings, are in humble submission to the will of the sovereign creator God. You know, there's a hierarchy. God is on top, and we're, you know, we're on the bottom, right? Yeah. We're the creatures, he's the creator. Civil religion turns that formula upside down, and God becomes the instrument of national policy. God, as the, you know, as the tribal deity of the United States, is invoked to, you know, politicians invoke his name to bless their political aspirations to elected office, and also to bless our national aspirations as we project power into the global community.
It's a little example, but it sort of illustrates where this leads. A couple of years ago, it turned out that all of the gun sites used in Afghanistan and Iraq had a Bible text.
John 3:16 on the Bible,
next to the serial number. Well, it was told to the soldiers who found out about it that these were holy weapons. An extension of the state is religious thinking, and this just gets so muddled together.
Right.
But of course, the structure you're describing really existed in the Middle Ages, and in some ways, that's what perhaps lies ahead of us. This merging of church and state, but in a more modern. I'm trying to avoid some of the words like some of these totalitarian powers we saw in World War II. But really, technology is handing that sort of statism to any dominant entity today.
Abraham Lincoln, I think, had a healthy attitude. He was asked.
Oh, God didn't favor either.
He was asked whether God was on the side of the North. And his answer was, you know, I don't know, I hope that we're on God's side.
Yeah.
You know,
elsewhere he said both sides prayed to God, and he couldn't be on both sides.
Well, that was his second inaugural address. And if there's one thing I would commend to every American to reread regularly, it's Lincoln's second inaugural. Yeah. It is just
a very humble document.
Very humble.
He had it absolutely so.
And biblically and prophetically dead on right.
Although he was not a conventional Christian in any form of that.
No.
But he was well read, and I think he had his moral compass well sorted out. So the two horns, what does the latter activity of this entity do, though?
Okay, so it says that we have these two horns, but then it says that it will exercise, or it exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence. And when it does that, it says it makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast whose mortal wound was healed. So the time is coming when, in repudiation of the principles of civil and religious freedom, the two horns become one. We exercise both civil and religious authority, and we enforce religious obligations. We enforce worship.
Heavy stuff coming down the pipe.
The whole mark of the beast. I have the word worship underlined repeatedly in this passage. Those who would not worship the image of the beast are to be slain. So there's persecution and death penalty for those who do not conform to the
I should have named this program Apocalypse Now. We need to take a break. We'll be right back to continue this discussion of the two-horned beast. Welcome back to the Liberty Insider program. Before the break, with guest Allen Reinach, we were talking about beasts, two-horned beasts in particular, and relating this biblical prophecy to the United States today. Mm-hmm. But there's an antecedent to that, and you just read a text there where it says that this new modern two-horned beast power exercises an aggressive power in support of another beast.
Well, not so much in support, it says all the authority of the first beast, which is a reference to how during the Middle Ages, during the Middle Ages, civil and religious authority were largely under the domination of the church.
So it's the medieval model, and the medieval Christian church took the poison pill and became itself the enemy of true religion.
Now, ironically, you know, those who think about this in the modern American context often suggest that there is a part of the religious right that is theocratic, that wants to impose,
you know, a
religious rule. But the reality is that both the left and the right in America today have devalued liberty of conscience and are seeking to impose their own moral and spiritual agenda on the nation. They're, to be sure, they're very different competing moral agendas from the left and the right, but neither side is terribly respectful of liberty of conscience.
Absolutely. Oh, I can see, we can see that just sort of formulating before our eyes. But you know, I've mentioned it before on this program, but within the politically, I shouldn't say Christian right, because you're right, there's Christian left, Christian right, but they're both more and more looking to political power to support their agenda. And within that whole movement, there is the, well, the most extreme form, Christian Reconstructionists.
Right.
I mean, they don't mince any words. They want an Old Testament government supported by law. You know, I'm surprised they keep saying it, because it's just exactly like the Taliban. Death penalty for Sabbath breaking, for homosexuality, for what's one of the other? Oh, adultery. Amazing.
North Carolina had a resolution that failed because it was it became known and criticized, but they wanted to throw off the shackles of the federal Constitution's First Amendment and claim the right to make North Carolina an overtly Christian state.
Yeah, I remember that. And they're clutching at some historical legal straws, because it's really
fighting the Civil War all over again.
The South will rise again. That's really what's going on. They're going back to fight the lost cause. And there's no question that the constitutional dynamic changed, where there were initially sovereign states with a federal government that had limited powers, but that's not the case now. And it's good, bad, or I mean, it might be good, bad, or indifferent, but you can't roll back the history books just because you don't like what's going on. And under cover of that argument, they're really trying to bring in a theocratic type regime.
And you know, having thrown off the Voting Rights Act, they now want to control again who can vote and restrict voting. Well, this is a very interesting prophecy, because it has the United States more and more forsaking principles of liberty of conscience and having the state take an active role in enforcing religion and worship. And that's a very dangerous situation.
How do they do that? Read that text again.
Well, it says it exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast whose mortal wound was healed. And later it says it forms an image of the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived, and gives breath to that image and causes that those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. And then there's a passage about that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of its name, and that's the infamous 666.
And that's, you know, many Christians are confused about 666 and easily frightened. 666 pops up a lot. I see it in all sorts of barcodes and stuff.
Very much. And I even have it as the code on one of my credit cards. You know, the three-digit code.
Really, no, I'm not inclined to think that's a literal fulfillment of the prophecy, and it might even be an inside joke by a lot of programmers.
Then I might have the mark of the beast already, Lincoln.
But the mark of the beast is not essentially a number; it's an activity, isn't it? It's a stance. But what I was getting at there is, we know that the modern states, and most personified by the United States, do control international finance, they do control the monetary system, and have that ability, as it says there, to say that if you don't agree with this policy, you cannot buy or sell. I mean, that's hardly beyond the purview of a modern state.
The United States, as you and I were discussing off air, has been utilizing economic sanctions to great effect as a primary tool of war, really.
Right.
And
or
you know, there are those
and nations.
Look, there are those even within our own church who poo-poo this identity of the United States in prophecy or the role. Today, the United States is exercising a dominant role in the global economy, in global power. We have, by some estimates, as many as 750 military bases around the world. That's more than 3 bases for every country in the world. We are absolutely the dominant military power, the dominant economic power. We are the world's empire, the world's policeman. It remains for there to be the right set of circumstances, and the Bible doesn't tell us what it is, but the right opportunity for this kind of global religious coercion to come into play.
Yeah, and it would involve more than just the United States, but the United States clearly is situated to take the lead.
Is the world leader.
Yeah. So we're in an interesting dynamic, and nobody knows the exact next development as far as human history is concerned, but prophecy lays out a broad outline, and it's hardly stretching a point to apply that to the United States today.
No, it's not stretching it at all. But I've often said the antidote to the mark of the beast is understanding the character of God and understanding the gospel. A loving God did not coerce the conscience.
Well, now you're getting to the root point on religious liberty. It needs to be for all people and lack coercion. And many people say you can't, it's going to be hard to identify, the subtleties on it. No, any great global deception like is discussed in Revelation will stand out instantly because coercion's involved. And there'll be them and us. This form of religion is held up higher than the other. So
I've often said, I've got 4 kids. They were all teenagers at one point. Now they're starting to at least be numerically beyond teenagers, although they still act like teenagers. Yeah. And I've often said, how easy would it be for God to simply reach down, alter their brain chemistry, and make them perfectly healthy, happy, holy, and obedient? And how often as a parent have I prayed for that? I've been tempted to pray for that. But, the gospel, God did not solve the sin problem by exercising his omnipotence. He didn't, wipe their memories. He didn't, reprogram Adam and Eve's brains. He offered his own son to die on the cross to restore the broken relationship with us.
Now, I've heard Christopher Hitchens, recently deceased, going on and on about this, and he says, he has no time for a God that made us defective and then asked us to be obedient. But he misses the point, and we need to mention it here. Sin is what's harmed us and affected our thinking process. And God's very charitable.
He didn't make us defective.
He's not going to. No, he didn't make us defective.
He made us perfect. We screwed up on
We've had a fall from grace and power, and God's
and
like
we're
a
reaping
parent.
the consequences.
You're mentioning parents. He's gently nudging us toward the truth, but we have to make that choice. We have to steer clear of great deceptions yet to come.
It seems very obvious to us, but love requires freedom. Love is not something that can be commanded or coerced. Love has to be free, and that's the essence of the gospel, that Christ was given to us, to the human race, to be our brother, to be our Savior, because a loving God can't force us, won't force us to worship him. He doesn't want the obedience of slaves, of automatons. He desires a loving response freely given. So true worship comes from the heart and has to be freely given. And the mark of the beast is absolutely a repudiation of these fundamental principles of the character of God. It really is portraying God as a tyrant, as the devil himself.
It's worth remembering that the prophet Daniel lived at the epicenter of the global power of his age. He dealt with some serious issues. His life was on the line many times. He was dealing with a superpower. And yet, when the angel brought him prophecies relating to the end of time, he said at one point, he said that he fainted clean away. He couldn't deal with it. He was shown those great kingdoms throughout history. But in Revelation, John reveals another kingdom, a final power that's characterized as two horns, lamb-like in aspect to a certain point, but aggressive and dominant like the old dragon powers of the past. The United States, I think, clearly is that power. And it's worth remembering that while there's the benign side, the protection of religious freedom, and that we wish it well, we may well too, like Daniel, faint away with shock and awe as we see even this great power turning against the principles of heaven, that we do at our hazard, just as Nebuchadnezzar did in his era. For Liberty Insider, this is Lincoln Steed.